This morning I am in Sacramento, California. We're here at the County Public Law Library, a guest of its director and staff. And I am talking with Michele Finerty, who is at the moment a sort of a freelance independent law librarian. She worked for a long period of time at McGeorge here in Sacramento. Michele, with that said, could we ask you a little bit about your life, both when you were young and today?
Certainly. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. I went as an undergraduate to Loyola, graduated from Loyola in Chicago, Loyola University. And I went to the Art Institute quite a bit because I always fantasized that I wanted that as my home. They have a huge marble staircase, and it was just beautiful, and it really struck me as something very elegant and wonderful. And being at Loyola, I was in their downtown campus, and I could walk down Michigan Boulevard every day. It probably was a couple of miles, and the lake is adjacent, a little further out, so it was a beautiful time. Then I went to the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana for my master's in library in information science. And I enjoyed Champaign-Urbana very much. It struck me when I first moved to Orange County later that Champaign, that small college town, had probably every foreign film that came out. But when I first moved down to Orange County, there were only one or two theaters in all of the area that you could go to a foreign film. It's not that way now, but at that time I really thought, this is very odd. This is a larger cosmopolitan area. But anyway, so I enjoyed living there as well.
Orange County just strikes me as being essentially all city.
Yes,
I
you're
mean,
right.
they may not have as many high-rises. I suppose they do now have a lot of them in various satellites of the greater Los Angeles area. But that's typical of cities of that type these days, I guess.
It is, and it's interesting when I would drive up to the Opera or the Dorothy Chandler and get back to Orange County, you could see almost a demarcation where it was cleaner. It was very different. LA was wonderful, and I really enjoyed visiting there and doing a great deal of exploring, but it wasn't an area that I wanted to live in.
Well, you've already mentioned opera as one of the areas that you sort of enjoy on the side from work, shall we say. Are there any other similar passions or hobbies or other pursuits that occupy time outside of your more normal sorts of responsibilities?
Yes. Well, I like theater, film, art museums. I collect fountain pens and inkwells. I just think it's very elegant to write with a fountain pen. I have also an abiding interest in the Manhattan Project. And some time ago I attended Smithsonian Institute has seminars. And this was a 4-day seminar in Los Alamos. And it was so interesting. I literally felt I wish it could go on forever. It was just fascinating to sit in that classroom and listen to the history. They had some of the scientists speak. They had the wives speak who were still alive at that time. Of course, we visited Ground Zero. It was a very emotional experience. I'm not a proponent of atomic energy, the atomic bomb, but what fascinated me was that this was something that had never happened before. Very few people knew about it in the country, not even Congress. And you had these very strong figures, General Groves and Oppenheimer, bring together brilliant people, actually from all over the world. And they were so specialized in what they did, they couldn't even understand each other. I mean, they couldn't talk shop with each other. And yet Oppenheimer was able to bring them together. Of course, the consequences of that were terrible later on. But the process and what went on there are very fascinating.
You mentioned that Congress didn't know about the Manhattan Project, which, for any of our viewers who may not be up on their history, was the development of atomic bombs
Yes.
by the United States.
Sorry, I should have mentioned
during World War II,
right.
at a time when the country was threatened by Hitler and the people in Japan in a way that we had never been threatened before.
Mhm.
And it was interesting, it wasn't just Congress that was in the dark. The vice president at the time, Harry Truman, who became president when Franklin Roosevelt died suddenly, before the end of the war. And it was Truman who had to decide what to do with this new technology.
Yeah.
He didn't know anything about it when he was vice president. This was
Mhm.
really very super secret.
Mhm.
And supposedly, the Nazis in Germany were working on similar development of
Right.
atomic weapons.
There was always the fear that they were ahead of us.
Mhm.
That turned out to be not the case, but they didn't know that at the time.
Well, we've learned from time to time how important it is that we sort of spy on each other, countries do, and part of it is to eliminate miscalculations based on information you just don't have.
Right, exactly.
So there's a certain, I think the understanding between countries is you tolerate a certain amount of spying because it's better for you to let the other side know it, whatever it is, than to keep it secret sometimes. But
Right.
that was kept very much in the dark.
Exactly. That was what fascinated me, that they could do that. I mean, that they were able to do that. Of course, the horror of what happened in Japan, there's no excusing it, but there are many sides about whether that was necessary to drop the bombs or not. I know that there's been a couple of controversies at the Smithsonian over this, but what fascinated me was all these brilliant minds working together and the ability to get them to work together.
You know, the Smithsonian also now has in its annex to the Air and Space Museum, the one that's out near Dulles Airport, they have the B-29 fully restored that actually dropped
Oh,
an atomic
yes,
bomb
yes,
on
yeah,
Hiroshima.
Enola Gay,
Yeah.
rather, yes, yeah.
And it was interesting, some years ago when I was at American University in D.C., the head of purchasing at the time, Alf Horrocks was his name, he was involved with the group in trying to restore that plane. And this is still underway, and this was many years ago, but it's there now, and it's something to see.
Yes, yes, it is. I was at the Smithsonian when it was still being refurbished or put together again, and we saw it. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it would fit into the facility they have on the mall in downtown DC. I think if it did, there wouldn't be space for anything else.
Exactly.
But their facility now out, their annex or whatever it's called, is quite a bit larger. Also has a number of other very large but very interesting exhibits,
Yes.
which has nothing to do with today's conversation.
I know.
How was it you became interested in this, if I dare ask?
Yes, you may. When I lived in Champaign-Urbana, I had the couple next door over for dinner, and he was on the chemical engineering department. And a friend of mine had his doctorate in history. These were three of the people who were there. And they started talking about Oppenheimer. I don't know why, but something resonated in me. I had never heard of it, and it just took off from there. I don't know what it was. So that was my entree into it.
Well, that sounds like an interesting hobby on the side, or
Yes.
or fashion, or whatever one would call
Right.
it. Yeah.
And do you know that there were three other people at the seminar in Los Alamos, a woman and two guys, and we are still friends. We communicate with each other.
Well, that's interesting and
Yes.
great in its own way. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about your career?
It's been long and interesting. I started out at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Law School, which was very exciting to me. It was interesting to learn about legal materials. And then I wanted to move closer to my family here in Sacramento, so I accepted a position at the Orange County Public Law Library. And that's where I was the longest period of time. I was there for 15 years. And while I did not deal directly with the public in my role as the head of technical services, through my work with AALL and the Government Relations Committee of AALL, I was involved with seeking information about the courts, their plans to go electronic, This was back in the 90s. And the investigation of that with courts all over the country and states, and state administrations all over the country was very, very interesting. This was part of a GRC initiative at first. And then several of us, including Tim Coggins and I, who were on the GRC at the same time, noticed that, and we weren't the only ones, that seemed to be no standards in these court websites for the public. And so we thought this is something that law librarians can do, so, how people use websites, what they're looking for. So the Frank Hodak organized, or rather approved, the organization of the working group, and from there, that later morphed into the Access to Electronic Legal Materials Committee, and now it's something else. I think it's merged with the Copyright Committee as well. And I think I just worked with a great group of people. That was one of the most exciting times in being a AAL. You really felt like you were doing something new. And you had strong, dedicated people, very intelligent people, but nice and interesting people at the same time. It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Well, you talk about enjoying working with the association projects of various sorts.
Mm-hmm.
When I did a little research, as I often do, always do before I have one of these conversations for the history, I did look you up on all that and elsewhere, and I was blown over by the listings you have of things you've done professionally in terms of service for the association and for other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I could mention a few of those, but the one that comes to mind is I remember that you were chair of the awards committee a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
We'll leave that where it is. Would you like to talk a little bit about some of your activities professionally? And more particularly, Michele, why they are important for you to do, and presumably for other colleagues to become more involved in.
I always felt that it was a meaningful activity, that I was doing something to help other people and to help the organization be strong. As the chair of the awards committee, it was our way of recognizing people's work. For the grants committee, when I was chair of the grants committee, it was an opportunity to help people who could not afford, perhaps, or their institutions did not cover the expenses to go to the annual meeting or the workshop. So there was always something meaningful in it for me. A long time ago, when I was chair of the Committee on Relations with Information Vendors, it was at that time, I think, starting out to recognize that we had to work with the publishers together. So there was a great deal of interest in how we could develop a more, go down the same path. Some publishers, and none that I work with today, or worked with, when I was at the library. I'm not singling them out, but I mean, there were a few that people had problems dealing with, and that was a wonderful way to help our colleagues solve the issues that go along with cost and accuracy and frequency. And so that's what that really kind of whetted my taste for being involved in it.
The work with publishers, it would be so easy for us as law librarians on our side of the continuum to just sit there and snipe and throw rocks at the other side. So they're doing it all wrong, but that isn't going to solve anybody's problem. And these publishers, they want us to basically want what they're doing.
Okay.
So communicating is extremely helpful for both sides of the continuum, I would think.
Exactly. I'm currently the president of the Northern California Association of Law Libraries, and I took over that position in June. As vice president, it was my responsibility to put together the 2-day institute in San Francisco. And it reinforced to me, I have always felt that we are in partnership with them. Mm-hmm. They want to help us, and it's an economic situation for them, but realistically, they have a business, and I respect that. And I don't feel that I've encountered anything where I felt that they were in the wrong, that they were unethical, nothing like that. So I do believe that the publishers are in partnership with us.
I agree with you. I too, thinking back, can cite an occasional maverick in the group perhaps, who may have gone about making sales or whatever in a way that I wouldn't be comfortable with if I were involved in it. But for the most part, the information that they provide, products that they put together for us, are extremely useful and well done and well, well presented. Unfortunately, on the other side, our budget sometimes can't fully support some of this stuff, but that, is just reality.
Yes.
And, there's always going to have to be an accommodation to that reality, and no matter how one does it. And understandably, the publishers are not in the charity business any more than we are when we go to work. We still want to charge a nice compensation for whatever it is we're doing. And that's reasonable.
It bothers me when some of our membership thinks that they're just there to sponsor our events. I don't feel that way. I don't think it's fair to ask them to finance us. I know we pay them, but at the same time, they have their own obligations. And I'm always taken aback by that when people say, well, get a sponsor. That's not the usual, solution that I would run to.
I remember when I first went to Washington, D.C., this is 40-some years back now, and became a member of the Law Librarians Society of Washington, D.C. They had a lot of federal librarians. In fact, in those days, the federal librarians were very much involved in the leadership, many of the leadership positions in this society. And the rule there was that we did not take sponsorship because of the potential for conflicts with government ethics rules. And that was not the norm from the two chapters I had been part of earlier. And even as times changed, the society relaxed a bit and started to certainly accept advertising for its Law Library Lights, which is a form of assistance from the publishing world to other things we're doing, obviously. And eventually, I think they now do take sponsorships of some of their social events as well.
One of the other nice things about being a law librarian and why I really enjoyed my career and continue to enjoy it is that luckily I've worked in institutions which gave us the latitude and the support to be involved and also to be creative. And over the years I've become, well, actually what happened was that a faculty member was going to teach for the first time animal law here at McGeorge, and so I contacted her and I said, if you need any of the library resources, please, let me know, I'll help you. So I ended up providing a guide, and now I'm working on a LibGuide for it as well, to animal law resources. And every semester that there was a class, I would give a presentation, and that led to my being involved with about 2 or 3 other people who gathered a group together to organize the Animal Law Caucus. And that was in I think our first program was in 1911. And it continues to be strong. There are many members. Every year we
You
have...
mean 2011?
Yes, 2011.
Yeah,
1911.
Association was pretty new about that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear. And when I was doing research for the first class, I realized what a large topic this was, and how many, and actually a number of law librarians across the country were involved in this, either as teaching or writing, but nobody knew each other. And so that was my goal, was to bring everybody together. And I hope I'm answering what you want, but
you are.
Everything is.
Oh, yeah.
Another aspect of what I really enjoy is that being involved with legislative advocacy. I think the Government Relations Office and Emily Feltrin and Elizabeth Holland do a fantastic job of teaching people how to be effective advocates and helping them, Emily had asked me to be the point person for the Uniform Electronic Legal Materials Act movement here in California.
Mhm.
We wanted to be the first state, but we ended up being the second. And so I pulled together a group of 3 other law librarians across the state who were very active legislative advocates. It was Judy James from UC Davis,
Mhm.
David McFadden from Southwestern, and Larry Meyer from the San Bernardino County Law Library. And we met with Diane Boyervine, the California Legislative Council, first. And because I looked up her biography, and she had been on the drafting committee for the Uniform Law Commission
Mhm.
for UALMA. So we made an appointment with her, and we found out the status, whether it was a bill yet or what it was going to authorize containing. And I think one of the best outcomes was that she realized what law librarians do.
Mhm.
And we formed a really close association, not a friendship, but an association with her, and she contacted us as to when the bill was going to move into certain committees. And in fact, one time I broke my ankle, so I could not go to the Capitol myself and deliver our letters of support. So we emailed them to her, and she hand delivered it to the committee chair for us. So it was a great partnership. I ran into her at the shopping mall about 3 weeks ago, and she said to me that she was going to contact me and the other 3 because they're starting to look at what authentication method to use. The bill, this is supposed to become active in July of 2015. So I continue being involved in it, and my work for AALL and NoCal legislative advocacy has really strengthened my work to support animal welfare legislation. And now every year I participate in the 2 lobby days for the ASPCA and the Humane Society. So I could carry what I learned into AALL into my personal passions.
A lot of it is really opening up communication. A few minutes ago, we talked about how you were involved with the vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And, they wanted to communicate, and we
Mhm.
wanted to communicate, and that
Mm-hmm.
fostered a relationship that was actually better than it
Mhm.
might otherwise have been between us. And now you've mentioned it with the state offices that are dealing with
Mhm.
legislation of certain sorts. I understand recently you were asked to comment on the possible dropping of the paper versions of the Code of Federal Regulations in the Federal Register
Mhm.
and the indexes. So you continue even on sort of a federal level in some of this.
Yes, and what was interesting was before the reporter contacted me, I had Elizabeth Holland from the Government Relations Office had called for law librarians to send to her how it's going to affect their clientele, the damages that it would cause perhaps in research for certain people. And so his deadline was the next day almost. And so I was able to contact Elizabeth to send me those comments from the librarians. And I asked him, I had called them back and I said, are you interested in seeing how this will impact other librarians across the country? And he said, yes, so I send those to him. So the synergy between us really keeps everything moving and I think enhances the success of this.
Mhm.
We'll see what happens with that bill.
Well, that you cannot
No.
be sure what's coming, but at least you can work on trying to steer it in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I noticed you've had some accolades formally given to you. I'll mention a couple that I know about. One is you have the Western Pacific and Northern California chapters have indicated you as a leader.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're president of the Northern California Association of Law Libraries now. And you received AALL's Volunteer Service Award in 2013. And this year you have receipt of the Northern California Association of Law Libraries Advocacy Award,
Mhm.
obviously for the kind of work you're doing here in Sacramento with the development of legislation, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
those were complete surprises to me. Because of the many brilliant law librarians I worked with, I was so surprised to get that award. There's so many people who are deserving in this association, and I just was completely honored and absolutely surprised.
Well, let me reinforce what I said early on near the introduction. I have looked at a lot of lists of accomplishments in the association in preparing for conversations of this sort.
Mm-hmm.
And it's rare that I find one as extensive and as yours, and solid. I had the same sort of thing recently in another interview. Merle Slayoff, who's also one of these people that just gets a lot done. And you and she, among others, are the kind of people that I've always been happy to have around doing what you do, because it certainly helps all of us out a lot.
I followed Muriel as the chair of the Technical Services SIS. She was the chair and I was the vice chair, and then I followed, and after that I became the chair after her after she was the chair.
Well, you not only do professional service, but you've actually written a few things. So you're an author. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, Michele?
Well, I haven't done much, and none of it is scholarly.
That's all a matter of definition. My stuff is always scholarly, and yours is, you know how that works.
I co-authored an article with a member of the McGeorge faculty for the California lawyer, the Sacramento lawyer, on the success of Proposition, I think it was 96, this was several years ago. It was legislation dealing with oversight of animal farms and the cruelty that went on. And then also I did 3 articles for Spectrum. One was it was entitled Leaders of the Pack, the Advancement of Law Librarians and the Advancement of Animal Laws. And there I outlined, what short background of it, who's been involved in it, and how surprising it was that there were these pockets of activity going on all over the country. I did one highlighting the recipients of the Gallagher Award. One of them was you, and your background and your contributions, and and the reasons you won that.
There's always got to be a black sheep in every group.
No, not at all, not at all. I was great being able to call you and tell you that. The only thing you couldn't attend the meeting to receive your award, but it was just wonderful that you got that award. Everybody.
Well, I still got it, even if I couldn't show up.
Right, exactly. And then, let's see what else. Oh, yes, I have done a couple of guides for the AllNet's advocacy section, the website there, on the successful advocacy for UM in California, and also tips for putting on a successful Sunshine Week program for your chapter.
Well, you've had a lot of experience with chapters and everything else, so I'm sure that tips for putting on a Sunshine Week is probably very practical.
Once again, it was fun because I tapped the California Library Association, the Special Libraries Association, the League of Women Voters, and then there's a group that are library trustees, and there were 5 of us put together these programs. It was very exciting. Sacramento is a wonderful place to draw in speakers because you have people here who have fought the good fight for court records, and I'm talking about attorneys, appellate attorneys. We had a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter on one panel. We had a judge, and people are always interested to learn the background of their struggles and what they've accomplished. We had 2 officials from the Newspaper Editors Association, California Newspaper Editors Association, and what they had to fight to get information was fascinating to everybody who attended that institute. I actually had to end it. People could have gone on for the rest of the day talking to them, but we didn't have that much time.
You mean they had their day jobs to go back to and couldn't just sit there and listen, huh?
Well, we had a limited, we had the room reserved for 4 hours and we had to leave at that time, so yes.
Well, Michele, we've been talking a lot about a lot of things that you've done and the benefits we all enjoy as a result of your work to some extent. But is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to mention before we conclude today's conversation?
I think the tools that I gained and learned in AALL and the chapter work that I've done helped me today. And as I said, working for animal law, animal welfare legislation, I'm going to continue to be of assistance wherever I can. I'm going to continue my membership and be active. And I have to say, I feel really blessed that I found this profession. It was exciting. It was fun. I mean, sometimes work is not that fun, but on the whole, my involvement with AALL and No-Kill was exciting, fun. Where else do you get to meet, interesting, intelligent, hardworking people who have the same goals for success of the association as you do?
Well, I think you've put it very well. Those are my exact sentiments as well, having worked also with various colleagues over the years and made a lot of good friends in the process, including ourselves,
Right.
actually.
Precisely, yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe on that, I should thank you, Michele, for being part of today's conversation, and I'm thanking you. I'm also thanking you on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodak, and Dick Spinelli, our colleagues with whom I have the pleasure and privilege of working to put together this oral history of our profession, law librarianship, for the Spinelli's Law Library Reference Shelf portion of Hein Online.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming in and talking with me this morning.